my cousin, who was more of a brother that I looked up to. I don't have any brothers, so I always wanted one, and he was like that for me. He was very wise. He was, I think maybe 10 years older. He had been there before me. Was the one that would always, watch out for that, don't do that, kind of a thing. So he was. I looked up to him. We all did. Um, he had brothers himself, my other cousins. Well, he got cancer,
Mm.
and uh, it started out as just something like a mole on his back. And so in the beginning, it was like, oh yeah, he's just got to go get chemo. This is what I'm thinking, like no big deal. And we would all take turns as a family to, drive him down to the hospital. It was like 2 week stays at a time, so he can get chemo, and it graduated to radiation therapy. And I had my turn. I went and I slept in the hospital cot next to him in the hospital room for 2 weeks while he got his treatments. But I thought everything was going to be fine. I didn't take it seriously, and then I would just fly home and go back to Vegas and do my life and live for me. Well, he tried that for a couple of years, but the cancer just went throughout his entire body,
Mm.
and it got into every organ and finally the brain. And I got a phone call from my parents, and they said, "Hey, you need to go and say goodbye to your cousin Steve." And that's when it finally hit me, like, oh shoot, like he's not going to make it. So I just remember flying out there and thinking of some joke I can tell him, because we were both very sarcastic and we like to tell each other jokes. When I see him, I'm going to tell him this joke and he's going to laugh. And I remember walking into the hospital room with my bags. I just come from the airport, and I didn't even recognize who I was looking at, Jana.
Mm. Yeah.
He was so underweight. He didn't even look human,
Mm.
and it it really was very, very shocking. And
I'm
5 minutes
sure.
later, he died. And I
Mm.
and I held him in my arms, and I watched him die, and it was extremely ugly. And that was the very beginning of the end of me, because here I am again, late 20s, living for myself, and now I'm confronted with death for the very first time, in a way that I can't ignore it. I mean, other people in my life had died, but now, like, I held somebody I cared about in my arms, and I watched him go. And so that messed me up. I for a year had nightmares of my own death, of people coming up to and just shooting me in the face and killing me, and I'd wake up. I couldn't sleep for a year, or family members of mine dying. Um, it was really, really difficult time. I talked about this to William Lane Craig once, and he said that what it is I was feeling the weight of my mortality.
Right.
And most people don't. Most people, they just push it out of their heads. And but they'll say things like, "Oh yeah, yeah, I'm not afraid to die. No, no problem," right? But they're not really feeling what it feels like, the weight of it, the reality that, yeah, I'm going to die. All my family members are going to die. Everybody I know, we're going to be gone. That's what the Lord allowed me to feel, and it felt crushing. Um, and that happened uh, for about a year, and I figured out how to, like, not deal with that properly. The way that I interpreted it and filtered my experience and all the things that were going on was to panic, recognizing that we're going to die. Which, as an atheist, as somebody who uh, rejected the Lord, is extremely frightening. It's I can't overstate how frightening that feeling is, to really truly realize that if it's true that God does not exist, and most people under that category of atheism too are materialists, well then this life is the only one you get, and once that's over, it's over. Like, you don't, there's no second round. That's it. And that's what I was sort of feeling, was, man, the finality of death. It's over. And then my father, a couple of years later, my father was in a tragic accident and broke his neck.
Mm.
And we thought he was going to die. And it was at that moment that all of those things that I'd swallowed down came flooding back to the surface,
Mm.
to the point where I really felt so overwhelmed I couldn't even talk. And I just remember talking to the neurosurgeon at the hospital where my father was. And he sort of, they had performed initial surgery to understand the extent of the damage to my father's injury. And he was explaining this. And I just remember watching his lips move, but just not hearing him at all. And then thanking him and going outside to the front area of the hospital and falling into the bushes and just weeping.
Mm.
And it was really there's two reasons, and one that is just truly it reveals my problem. But the first reason was obviously because of my father, because I love my father. But the other one was because the reality of the situation is I'm going to die, and I'm literally mourning that, which is very self-centered and narcissistic, really. And that's exactly what I was meant to feel. Now that I look back, I recognize this is it, because everything I did from 17 to now I'm 30. My father got when he broke his neck. I'm 30 years old, and I realized that everything that I had done was a big exercise in ultimately nothing, because at the end of the day, I'm going to die, and everything that I experienced and everything that I did, it really doesn't have ultimate meaning. Something like, I don't know, came to me, which is I should pray, you know, and so I'm like, okay, I don't know what else to do. So I literally prayed. This was for the very first time, Jana, and it was the realest prayer I've ever prayed in my entire life. And it was one word, and it was just help. That's all I could get
Mm.
out because I was choking. I was weeping so much.
Mm.
And that's in that moment I felt peace, or calm, and it just went through me. It started at the top of my head and it went all the way through me. And I knew in that moment that God was real.
Wow.
It's an immediate awareness. I don't know how else to describe it.
Right.
And I got back up, and I realized, okay, now I need to go. My mom's probably, I left her, like she's probably weeping too. So I went back into the hospital and I just said about uh, helping my dad and helping my mom. But
Mm.
in that moment, that was it. That was the light switch that went off or went on for me, and I knew I had to go to church and understand what this meant for me moving forward.
So there's a presumption there that when you say help, that you're praying to, because at this point you had explored different realities, but I presume that you were praying to the God of the Bible,
I was.
or and that when this sudden knowledge or actually experience of peace, there was a profound presumption that it was from God of the Bible, Jesus Christ. I mean, that was the source. I mean, it sounds as if you didn't question that at all.
I
But
did
I can
actually.
imagine oh, okay, because I'm thinking somebody listening might say, "Well, how do you know?"
Yeah.
That's just how do you know? That was just how you grew up. So are you kind of reaching back to that, or you were in a point of distress? I mean, how did you know?
That's a really great question, and one that I actually I wrestled with that too. Um, I think everybody should ask that question when they hear that story.
Yeah, right.
Uh, and
Sure.
so, for me, especially, I was thinking, oh, maybe that was a moment of weakness. Maybe I had too many beans. Maybe, you know, uh, or
Sure.
something more akin to Buddhism is true, or The Secret, or whatever other pagan nonsense is going on out there, where I just triggered something inside myself, and my own inner strength unlocked, and that's what all that was, right? Um, what it caused me to do, because again, what I did was I prayed to the God of the Bible. I like how you put that. I prayed to the God of the Bible, um, and I was if I can just say it this way, given a response. Just put it that way. And so what that caused me to do was go investigate Christianity for the very first time. Only now as a skeptic. And so for the next couple of months, I jumped in like headfirst into understanding the historicity of the scriptures, to understanding the minimal facts of the resurrection, uh, to understanding all of these things, so that I could understand what happened to me. And what I've discovered was that actually Christianity is true.